Look, one of the things that I feel most embarrassed about myself, and I've told you guys this before, is that when the initial arguments came out, I believe it was like a Daily Beast article that called Russell Brand right wing. And I remember going through that article and just being like, this is bull. This is not true. He's not a right winger. That's not right. What are these people talking about? That's not accurate. And one of my consistent flaws is I default to taking people at face value, right? I'm no longer going to make that mistake of taking people at face value. That is naive. What I discounted in the past is this idea of trajectory. What's your trajectory? What direction are you going in? What's the logical endpoint of this current thing you're doing? And in the case of Russell Brand, we got to call a spade a spade. The article that was calling him right wing back 2-3 years ago, whatever it was, they were right. They were right before a lot of other people, right? I think back to, I was defending Tulsi Gabbard way too late when, I was like one of the last people to come to it. Like, oh, okay, she did totally jump the shark now. And she says, she's just a standard conservative Republican now. Even though she has the veneer of being a little different. No, ultimately she supports Donald Trump. Listen to the arguments that she's making. I see where this is going. I see where this is going to end, right? With Russell, very, very similar thing. With Jimmy Dore, very, very similar thing, saying Trump is out-lefting Kamala Harris.
But yeah, we've been talking a little bit about the back and forth between Kyle Kulinski and, as I say, kind of just the Jimmy Dore left, although it's really not even the Jimmy Dore left anymore. I'm not, we need to come up with a new term for it because these people are obviously not on the left. But, the cohort, the fake, phony, anti-establishment crowd, the Jimmy Dores, the Russell Brands. Well, Kyle Kulinski is finally, at his limit with these people, and he's finally on the warpath, calling people out by name. This is triggered quite the response from Jimmy and Matt Taibbi, all these people. I think Russell Brand to this point has not responded at all. Russell's above Kyle. He's like, I don't, lions do not care about the opinion of sheep or whatever. But, he has a lot more subscribers, to be fair. Anyway, Kyle now has made 2 videos in like the last day, totally destroying this segment of the online left, right, whatever you want to call it. Russell Brand goes full hack with televangelist prayer BS, and then Kyle debunks RFK and Russell Brand's pro-Trump lies. I definitely recommend you guys check out both of these segments in their entirety. We're going to play a clip from one of them in which Kyle talks a little bit about actually how embarrassed he is for ever having defended these people. He's talked a little bit about this in the past, but this time he really gets honest in an interesting and vulnerable way, and one that honestly I can kind of relate to because we sort of also gave some of these same people the benefit of the doubt for probably a little bit longer than they deserve. But yeah, Zach, do you have any comments on this before we take a look?
No, dude, let's go ahead and plow right into it. So I will say, just for anybody who isn't familiar with old school Kyle, this guy did come into YouTube just destroying televangelists, just destroying charlatans of the right who kind of exploited people because of religion, right? One of the things, even though Kyle was always an ardent atheist, I think one of the humanizing elements of his show was that he always had a real caustic attitude more towards the Joel Austins and the Pat Robertsons and all of these guys, instead of the, vulnerable people that were poor and desperate and, giving away their money to these guys. He realized that it was a cruel injustice, and he spent a lot of his time calling it out. That's why his show is called Secular Talk. So I think, in the same way a lot of us, Gavin came to YouTube like that. I came to political commentary a lot through Russell Brand. I remember when he first announced Under the Skin. I loved it. I remember when he interviewed Yuval Noah Harari, and then I went and bought Sapiens and read the whole thing. And now I'm like, I have mixed opinions about this guy. He said a bunch of stupid
David
shit.
Lynch back in the day.
Exactly.
Either way, let's take a look here, guys. As I said, this is a clip from Kyle's video where he goes off on him for this cringy televangelist prayer with Tucker. I think you're also right, Zach, about how, Russell, these people going in this weird, like, evangelical televangelist direction. Maybe that was truly the last straw for Kyle. His channel is called Secular Talk. This is his original bread and butter. So he's like, come on, guys, I will not abide the televangelist cringe.
It's just pathetic. Look, one of the things that I feel most embarrassed about myself, and I've told you guys this before, is that when the initial arguments came out, I believe it was like a Daily Beast article that called Russell Brand right wing, and we're going back like probably 2-3 years now. Shit, maybe
he also responded to that.
And I remember going through that article and just being like, this is bullshit. This is not true. He's not a right winger. That's not right. What are these people talking about? That's not accurate. And one of my consistent flaws is I default to taking people at face value, right? So like, oh, if they say they're an enlightened centrist, or if they say they're just anti-establishment, it's like, okay, you're an enlightened centrist or you're anti-establishment. I'm no longer going to make that mistake of taking people at face value. That is naive. What I discounted in the past is this idea of trajectory. What's your trajectory? What direction are you going in? What's the logical endpoint of this current thing you're doing?
Pause this for 1 second?
In the case of Russell Brand, we got to call a spade a spade. The article that was calling him right wing back 2-3 years ago, whatever it was, they were right. They were right before a lot of other people, right? I think back to, I was defending Tulsi Gabbard way too late. When, I was like one of the last people to come to it, like, oh, okay, she did totally jump the shark now. And she says, she's just a standard conservative Republican now, even though she has the veneer of being a little different. No, ultimately, she supports Donald Trump. Listen to the arguments that she's making. She says she's anti-warmonger as she supports the genocide in Gaza. So you got to call a spade a spade. Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Ana Kasparian of the Young Turks, they were ahead of other people when they said this mother, she's right wing. She's right.
All right, so now I do have to, be a little bit critical of Kyle, because I think, unfortunately, here we see another example of him missing that trajectory that we talked about. Come on, bro. You don't think Ana Kasparian is headed in any suspicious directions? We've been saying it for a while, maybe earlier than you would have. That's fair. But I do think that specifically Ana, if not Cenk and Ana, are both also totally examples of people that you can clock as, oh, yep, they're doing the right wing grift. Where are they going to be from 5 years? I don't think it's going to be in the same place as they are right now. I think it might be in a whole other ideological island. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, specifically Ana. I think Cenk, he's old enough that he's like solid in his ideological foundation. It seems like Ana, as she gets into like her, late 30s or early 40s, it really does seem like she's becoming a right winger. Maybe not a Trump MAGA supporter, but it does seem, she was defending Project 2025 the other day. She's constantly shitting on the left, constantly sounding like a Fox News host on crime. It's crazy.
Like Kyle, if I don't know if he'll see this, but if he does, I think you genuinely hear us out on Ana Kasparian. And I know you guys probably have a personal relationship that, nobody's saying you can't be friends with her, whatever. But I think to classify her as like improperly labeled as a right-wing pivot, let's go ahead and hear some of her new takes. One, constantly fear-mongering about police presence in California, constantly taking every crime story and blowing it out of proportion, fear-mongering about bail reform, right? And that's another one. You exempted Cenk from this, but let's also talk about Cenk's not in my backyard hysterical. Yeah. Let's talk about him endorsing Rick Caruso. And, that's unacceptable. Yep. A billionaire real estate developer flies in the face of every single principle TYT has ever had. Let's talk about Ana Kasparian going on the Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro and talking about how she loves engaging with him, but you just can't engage with other people like that on the left. Let's talk about the birthing person hysteria. Let's talk about how she just has straight up a distaste for trans people, right? Like, I agree that she has a lot of left-wing positions, but when you're going to call yourself the host of the Progressive News Network, we're going to scrutinize you on the fringes. And it looks like what's happened is as she's gotten more comfortable, right? As she's gotten more privileged, they're like inches away from celebrating Gavin Newsom, like cleaning out homeless tents if they haven't already done that. It's ridiculous, the kind of content that we've seen put out at the Young Turks recently. And that is, we're fair over here for the most part. We try and be, at least. We gave Ana credit when she had a really heartfelt moment talking about how her family history as an Armenian. It was very heartfelt and it was very warm. And Cenk also is a tremendous advocate for the people of Palestine. We've given him countless credit for going to bat and locking horns with Rabbi Shmuley, all kinds of ghouls. But you cannot ignore that they're doing this because they're trying to mainstreamify their audience after they have lost them, the true progressives, over their whack opinions on trans people, crime, and homelessness.
Yep. And again, it's not even with Ana. It's not even just the fact that she has some opinions which like dissent from the progressive left. That's cool. I feel like most people probably do, even that are solid leftists. You're like, oh, here or there, I might disagree with the consensus. That's fine. What I think is really telling about Ana Kasparian is not just her actual policy positions where she disagrees with the left, but her posture towards the left, how increasingly she seems to be an anti-leftist, anti-progressive reactionary. She very clearly is coming to her political decisions sometimes not based on an actual factual analysis, but just based on like which side she thinks is being crazier. You know, all these insane lefties on the all these insane trans activists, you know, taking people on Twitter and acting like that's representative of an entire movement or of an entire ideology, painting with a broad brush, and again, constantly punching left, meanwhile entertaining right-wing hosts and their adulation of her recent pivot. So yeah, I think Anna's obvious. You know, she's another one to put in that group, but I get it. Kyle's maybe not quite as savage as us. Maybe he'll come to terms at some point, but who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to play any more of this?
Yeah, let's take a little bit more of this.
They were Huger of the Young Turks, Ana Kasparian of the Young Turks. They were ahead of other people when they said this motherfucker she's right wing. She's right wing. I see where this is going. I see where this is going to end, right? With Russell, very, very similar thing. With Jimmy Dore, very, very similar thing, saying Trump is out-lefting Kamala Harris. I mean, you gotta factor in trajectory. Maybe the best thing is not to take people at their word at face value every step of the way, because then in some circumstances, like with me, you end up getting burned when the jig is up. You end up getting burned when finally they reach their final form and they start saying the things that their biggest critics said all along that's where they were going to end up. Turns out the biggest critics were correct. They were
Also, I do want to give Kyle credit because I think it would be very easy for us to come out here and try and pretend that Kyle like knew better all along and he was cuddling up to these people for some sort of personal gain. And that just doesn't read true to me. I think Kyle genuinely means it. I think he is 100% authentic when he says, I really try and take people at their word. I really try and respect people say, this is my politics. I'll say, okay, that's your politics. That's what they've said is their politics, and give them the benefit of the doubt over and over again. And I'm glad that he's kind of understanding that new media is not immune to the nefarious pressures of old media, right? Audience capture can be just as pernicious as a boss overhead, sometimes more pernicious than a boss that, you know, is a producer that's hanging over your head, right? Because they're also responsible for how you get paid, how you grow, all of these different things, right? So I think that he genuinely wants to give those people the benefit of the doubt. I think he genuinely wants people to, you know, feel like he is honest and he's, you know, somebody that you can
he's
engage
not a purity
with.
Tester.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he's right. He got burned with that shit. And, you know, I think he'll get burned again if he doesn't change his mind about the Young Turks.
100%. And also, I totally understand why Kyle doesn't want to play the role of like the purity testing left flank attack dog. That's kind of like what we do. And I get it. Like, that's not really Kyle's lane. He's not going to take every single instance of someone stepping out of line and be like, this is outrageous, you know, like we like to do that. That's kind of, you know, something that we enjoy. I get that's not what Kyle traditionally does all the time, but I do think it's really, you know, appreciated here that he is being 100% honest about these fools, these grifters, and what they've done, how they're totally betraying all of their previously stated leftist progressive values, right? And like in the case of Russell Brand and these, you know, specifically, it's one thing, again, it's one thing to be a leftist who's just so sick of the Democrats that you're like, you know, I think on this issue, maybe the Republicans are better, maybe on that issue, like, I don't know, I don't know, pick your issue, whatever. That's fine. But it's a whole other thing to be like appearing at Tucker Carlson rallies and, you know, doing literal propaganda for Donald Trump. I mean, at that point, it's just obvious. At that point, it's just obvious what your gig is. You're not being honest. You're not being an intellectual thinker. You're just being a cheerleader for the establishment, which is ironic because they pretend to hate the establishment more than anyone.
Yeah, we had the Matt McNamara, he's a philosophy professor at the University of Michigan, and we had him on for a discussion about his book. But one of the things we asked him about was the Mark Fisher essay about Russell Brand, right, where he references this guy being such an opportunity for the left, right, where he talks about, wow, this is a guy who makes communism seem sexy and cool and not like blasé and boring and all that kind of shit. It's just hilarious how badly that essay's aged. It's not Mark Fisher's fault. It's the fact that this guy was an obvious con man, or not an obvious con man, sorry. In hindsight, it's 2020. He was an obvious con man. He was doing all of this as like a calculated way to insulate himself from ever being held responsible for the crimes that he committed when he was a Hollywood playboy. But I think that it's also true that it would have been nice if he was authentic and he could have been a real advocate for the left.
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, that's basically the majority of what I wanted to share with you guys as far as the Kyle segment. Definitely interesting. I agree with his observations.